If you cannot stop thinking about your ex, and you wish you could, you are in the right place. I'm Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, the author of Exaholics, Breaking Your Addiction to an Ex-Love. I am an experienced divorce and breakup recovery therapist and coach. And today I'm here talking through your questions about how to get your ex out of your head and reclaim your mental and emotional inner peace. So we're going to be tackling a bunch of your questions today. I'm excited to dive into this. And this is also take 2 of this live stream event. So I've had the opportunity to have a bunch of your questions come in that are so wonderful. I addressed some of these yesterday in the first live stream event, but they were so good. We're going to be talking about them today as well, in addition to some new ones. And if you have questions or things that are on your mind, if you're going through a bad breakup or a divorce and just feel haunted by your ex, I would love to hear about it so that we can speak to your experience. And so I can provide some insight and hopefully guidance that'll be useful for you today. So I'm going to be on the lookout for your questions and comments as we're talking. So, some of the questions that we're going to be diving into today, I think anybody who has been through a bad breakup can relate to, although some of them are more specific and related to certain life experiences. Like this one, I had a listener write in, Dr. Lisa, how do I stop thinking about my ex when I work with them and I see them every day? Like, that is such a hard situation. The struggle is so real. We're going to get into that. I had another person write in to say, Dr. Lisa, I was so just traumatized and destroyed by some of the things that happened around this relationship, and I cannot get over it. It's so alive in my mind a year out. What do I do? If you can relate, I am glad that you're here with me today. Another person got in touch, shared something that's actually really common. I hear this from people all the time, which is, I thought I was getting over this. I wasn't thinking about this relationship or this person that much anymore. And then my ex moved on and now I'm obsessed again. What do I do now? So we will be diving into that. And another person wrote in just yesterday, shared something so poignant, which was, I miss my ex. Like, I really miss our shared life together. I miss them. I think about it all the time. How do I stop thinking about them when that is feeling really real for me? So those are just some of the questions we're going to be tackling together today. And again, I want to hear what's going on with you. So please share your questions or even just what's happening if you'd like to share with our community, because I think that there's a lot of power and comfort in even just knowing that you're not alone. So thanks for sharing your story with our crew here as we're talking today. So before we dive into specifics and details, it is really important for me to share just a little bit of context for you, the machine of the breakup recovery process, because my answers to these questions and to your questions are going to be related to the stages of healing after relationship loss. The answer to the question is going to be different depending where you are in this process. And so to get clarity into this, even before we start talking, I'd like to invite you to come to my website, growingself.com, and you can come to this one page, Can't Stop Thinking About X. There are actually so many resources for you on this page. I have a podcast on this topic. I have links to a bunch of different articles, but you can also find a link to a breakup assessment, essentially, that will tell you, how over your ex are you? Where are you in the stages of healing after a relationship loss? If you take this, you'll get a report that will deliver your results. It'll show you what stage you're currently in, and will also deliver some customized recommendations about the things that you can do to help yourself move forward. So take that and then, be thinking about that during this conversation today. So this is what we're doing today. But really briefly, if you're new around here, if this is your first time tuning in, I should introduce myself very briefly. I am Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. As I mentioned at the beginning, I am a breakup and divorce recovery therapist and coach. I'm actually a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm the founder of Growing Self-Counseling and Coaching, and I'm also the host of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. And one of the things we talk about on the podcast routinely is around heartbreak recovery, because it's something that I have a strong heart for. I have a lot of expertise in. I'm the author of Exaholics, Breaking Your Addiction to an Ex-Love, where I did a lot of original research in the writing of that book that gave me some insight and understanding to the healing process that I think is a little bit different. So I just wanted to share that in case you're not already familiar with who I am and my work, and offer you that as a resource to support you on your journey. So let's dive into the stages of healing after relationship loss to give you a quick overview of how this works. And then with that in mind, we'll come back around to your specific questions, and it'll make sense to you when I share my answers. So the very first stage of relationship loss is withdrawal. This is the big freak out stage, which happens when our attachments to other people are broken or even threatened. We're flooded with big feelings, intrusive thoughts. We have a craving for contact, a compulsion to connect with our ex, and it is really real. Thankfully, this first stage usually doesn't last a super long time, although it can. And if you get stuck in this phase, it's very difficult. Ideally, you will, with support, move into the next phase of healing, which is a relationship clarity phase. And in this phase, the work is really thinking about, can I get back together with my ex? Is there a future for this relationship? Sometimes there is. I'm a marriage counselor. I help people repair their relationships all the time. And sometimes they did need to take a break in order to come back together again. But getting clear about the possibilities for a relationship will give you the certainty that you need to either start trying to fix that relationship and have a second act, a second chapter, or move into the next phase, which is closure and grieving. In this phase, we're saying to ourselves, yeah, this is really over, and we're feeling it in a totally different way than we were in the earlier stages of relationship loss. We're actually processing and grieving the loss in a way that is healing and that sets us up for success in the next phase of breakup recovery, which is emotional healing. This may surprise you because some people think, isn't grieving emotional healing? No, it's not. If you haven't done the work of grieving, it will actually obstruct the emotional processing that often needs to happen in this phase. Things like anger, maybe even rage, guilt, regret, shame, fear. These are all big emotions that need to be recognized and dealt with in order to continue moving on through the healing process. Additionally, somewhere along the lines, there is a distinct stage of this that can sometimes happen earlier, sometimes later. I'm putting it in the middle just for your reference, but it's related to self-care, self-preservation, making decisions about healthy boundaries for you in this, new era. And this can include, decisions around whether to stay in contact with an ex on social media, whether or not you want to allow them to continue talking to you, whether you want to continue reaching out to them, and some of the practical day-to-day changes that we need to make in the way we operate in the aftermath of a relationship loss. A extremely important phase of this work that really can't happen unless you've given yourself the opportunity to go into the emotional healing of this process is the learning and growing phase. Here is where you're feeling calmer and you can really dig into things like, what did this experience teach me, about relationships, about what I want and most importantly, where I need to learn and grow. What do I want to do differently next time? And so here's where we can really do some deep digging into the relationship itself and wring all the life lessons out of that experience that will then eventually translate into a life design strategy. And that's really the last phase of this work. But after we go through that growth and learning phase, then comes the phase where we can really do what we have gathered here today to learn how to do, which is stop thinking about your ex. It is the emotional and mental freedom phase. In all the previous phases, in some ways, we really needed to think about our ex because we had important growth work to do. When you've moved through these stages successfully, those intrusive thoughts about your ex, their work is done. And now the name of the game is learning how to say goodbye to those so that you're not staying in that space anymore. So this phase involves learning internal skills and strategies to protect yourself from intrusive thoughts about your ex. And this can be a lot of work. It can take a lot of practice, but it's really important to learn how to do because it's in this phase that you'll really finally, once and for all, feel like you're free and you can move on with your life. And then at that point, you can move into the life design phase where you're not thinking about your ex anymore. You're thinking about where you want to go next, what you want your life and your love to look like in the future. And that is often a really exciting time for people. But I will share that one of the punchlines, the takeaways of this entire talk is this. Many people want to leapfrog over all those stages of healing. They don't know that the stages of healing actually exist, which is, I think, a problem in our culture, frankly. But because of that, they're like, tell me how to stop thinking about my ex, when actually they haven't done the necessary work of previous stages to allow for that to happen. So many times when people are asking questions about this, the answer is actually what stage are you in currently, and have you done the work of that stage? Because when people do, they will develop in such a way that they will be able once and for all to let go and move on with really good and important growth work having been done. And so if you're listening to this and thinking, nobody's told me this before, why did I know about this? You are not alone. I think a lot of people don't know about this because it's not something that's been discussed. Therapists do not know about this, like me. So I have a master's degree and a PhD in counseling psychology. This was never discussed. I personally lived through this experience, a horrible breakup. I also worked for years as a therapist, feeling kind of stuck with some of my clients going through this because nothing in my training prepared me to really be helpful and effective with people, figuring out how to effectively heal and grow after a relationship loss. So this led me to do a lot of my own research, and not just in psychology, but actually in biology to find the answers. And then that turned into my book, Exaholics, Breaking Your Addiction to an Ex-Love. And I just wanted to say this out loud because the fact that you didn't know that there were stages of healing or that your therapist didn't talk to you about that isn't your fault. And it's not necessarily their fault either, because there's just not awareness about that. But that's why I care so much about this topic, why I'm talking about it all the time, and why I'm here today talking to you guys. And also I put so much work into developing programs to help people move through this process, but also a lot of work in training therapists on what's going on and how to help people, and helping therapists develop new skills and strategies to be more effective. So that's why people come to my counseling practice, Growing Self-Counseling and Coaching, is because we have a lot of expertise in this area, and the way we manage divorce and breakup recovery is really quite different. And I spend a lot of time with the therapists on my team, teaching them about the ideas we're going to be talking about today. But it's also why I've developed training programs for therapists. And so if you are a therapist listening to this and you're like, yes, nobody told me about this either, and I would like to learn, this is a growth area for me professionally, come to my website, growingself.com/therapy. therapists, and you can get on the waiting list for my coaching certification program that will teach you how to be more effective for clients here. Okay, so I just wanted to provide all of that information for context about what we're going to be discussing today. And now that we have, I'm excited to be talking about your questions. So let's dig in. I had a super cool and I think very relatable question come in about how to stop thinking about your ex when you're working with somebody. And this question comes from Annika. And I think, Annika, that there are a few different pieces of this that are important to consider. But first of all, I really do want to validate the experience because it really is legitimately harder to heal and harder to move through those stages of healing when you're getting triggered all the time and when you're also having new experiences with your ex, like in the context of work, that it's not just past experiences that you're learning and growing and healing from. There's stuff happening like tomorrow that you have to figure out how to deal with. And so it's going to be really important for you to focus on the stage of healing we discussed previously related to how to set boundaries and how to practice really solid self-care at work. These can be process changes. First of all, is figuring out, what exactly do I need that would help me make this feel a little bit better. And it also depends, obviously, on the context of your organization. But it could mean making some strategic changes. Could you go to a different team? Could you change your schedule a little bit? Could you talk to your supervisor in a way that would allow you to prevent as much context with your ex while still doing your job effectively, but having those things in place would help. The other thing to think about is, where are you in this healing process overall? Because that is going to impact what you need to do in order to resolve this. So, for example, if you are actively pining away for this person and really wishing that they loved you back, there's some specific work to do around that. Are you in the withdrawal phase? You need to do relationship clarity to start getting closure. Have you even grieved yet? That's going to inform the work that will carry you towards that mental and emotional freedom. Or is it currently that right now when you see them, you are consumed with rage and want to stab them in the eye with a pen? I mean, I'm not advocating violence here, but is that what's coming up for you? The work that you need to do to move forward in this process is going to look different for you. So take a moment, if you haven't already, take that quiz that I put together from you. You can find it on this page, or also just come to growingself.com. In the main nav, you'll find free resources and a link to that quiz that will help you get clarity into your stage. But I also actually want to tie this back, Annika, to an even different piece, which could be more important for you, which is going back to life design. So, if I was your therapist or your coach, I would also be asking you some questions around, what are your long-term career goals? What do you envision for your professional future? Because is staying in this particular job even part of that? Could there be an emotional attachment to your ex that's kind of making you stay here, when in reality, if you look at the big picture of your life, maybe this is a fantastic opportunity to get clear about your long-term goals and get on a different trajectory that would carry you into maybe a different working environment that would support your professional success as well as your emotional healing. And you're an adult and you have lots of options. But getting clear with yourself around why am I still here, could be a really important part of that for you. So those are just some pieces of advice and just tying them into different points in this growth process that might be really productive for you. I hope that was helpful. So, moving on to another listener question. Grace sent in a really powerful and moving story about having lost her husband of 25 years. Like, he passed away, and then a year later got into a relationship that she described as being really intense and toxic, and that this person left her feeling used and betrayed, that he wound up moving on with another woman. And she talked about how heartbroken she felt, that it's a year later and she still just feels terrible and she can't forget about what happened. And it's not just like the relation, my sense, and of course I don't have all of the details and all of the information. I would love nothing more than to sit down and like dig into this with Grace, but that what is coming up for her, what feels alive, is not just about what happened in the relationship, but how it ended, the betrayal, trauma, the aftermath, the toxicness, how she was hurt, and that is what feels so hard for her. And I'm mentioning that she's tried therapy, but that nothing really seems to help. And this is so hard. And so my thoughts for you in this situation are a fewfold. And first of all, what's really important to know, and this is even above and beyond the general stages of healing after a typical relationship loss, is that a toxic relationship is going to have a slightly different arc of healing for a few reasons. Toxic relationships are oftentimes more addictive than healthy relationships. They are more sexually intense. There's a bigger feelings of chemistry. There's more emotional roller coasters and ups and downs. And if that was a piece of this situation that contributed to the intensity and the toxicity, it was by definition more addictive, and there's a chance that you could still be in that withdrawal and craving phase even a year out, depending on that. But I don't know if that is true for you, but it's definitely something to consider. Additionally, there is another variable that could be looked at, which is related to betrayal trauma. And this would be addressed, I think, for most people in that phase of emotional healing. Like, there were things that happened in the situation that were legitimately traumatizing to you. Maybe there are feelings of shame or regret or anger that need to be processed here and that haven't yet been processed. And until you do that, it's going to be really hard to move forward into the emotional freedom phase because you haven't done this work yet. So it's still bouncing around in your head. And also, I will say this with I want to be sensitive about how I word this. But I feel like to be a good friend to you, I need to mention that particularly when we are dealing with enormous grief, like the loss of your husband and partner of 25 years, there's so much there. And grief is an interesting thing. It can be so enormous that it is very common and very understandable to put ourselves into situations that can distract us or defer the work of that grief. And I don't know, but there could have been a component of that in your getting connected with this other person to begin with, and some of the feelings that you have that feel like they're attached to this other person may actually be related to unresolved grief around your relationship with your husband and the loss of him. And so I do not know if that is true, but if I was your therapist, I would be really curious to know more about that. And if that's the case, there's going to be a lot of dark emotions in your future and healing dark emotions. Dark emotions, being able to go into those with courage, and sometimes with a good partner who can help you navigate that experience, is incredibly powerful and healing. And can also feel scary. It can feel hard to do, but that's where the real work of growth happens. And that's what we do in that phase of emotional healing. And I suspect, Grace, that there's a lot of emotional healing here for you. So that is my advice. I hope that that's helpful. Okay, so let's dive into another question. And hey, if you're here with me right now, I want to hear your questions. I want to hear what's going on with you. So don't be shy about adding them to the comments so that I can speak to them during our time together today. And of course, if you want to follow up with me after the fact, you are welcome to do so. You can leave comments just right here in the comment section of this video, wherever you watch it, be it on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook. I will get them. Maybe we'll do yet another version where we talk about this topic in particular, or I might even use your question on an upcoming episode of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. So I'd really love to hear what's going on for you. Again, if you're just joining, we are talking about how to stop thinking about your ex, and I have some growth work for you to do to get the most out of this. Take the quiz. What stage of breakup recovery are you in? And you can find that at growingself.com. Can't stop thinking about X. Okay, so let's dive into our next question. I thought I was over my ex, but now there was somebody else and I can't stop thinking about them again. Help. I actually get this question all the time, and I think the reason why is because it is so legitimately confusing for people to have this experience. They felt better, they felt resolved, they're kind of moving on, but then their ex is now with somebody else and they're like, what do you mean? So this question comes from Alyssa, and her story is that she dated someone for 5 years and then wound up breaking up with them because, and this is what she shared with me, they were lacking romantic intimacy, where there wasn't the level of sexual connection that she was really hoping for. And so she shared that they stayed in touch as friends and that this was actually an important relationship for her. They were talking regularly, felt kind of best friendish to her. But then eventually he started dating somebody else. And somewhere during that courtship process, there was actually some conversation about whether or not there was hope for them. But Alyssa was like, you're with somebody else. I don't know about this. And so kind of shut that down. Then sometime later, her ex-boyfriend got engaged to somebody else. And that was about 6 months ago from the time that she wrote in. And since then, he has shut things off. And also, she isn't talking to him anymore. I think that maybe, and I'm speculating here, but something may have changed with her ex-boyfriend, getting more serious, like, no, I'm going to marry this person. It's not really appropriate to be talking for my ex-girlfriend that maybe I still had a little bit of a flame for, right? So now Alyssa is feeling really sad, and she's afraid that she'll never find a good guy like him again, and she's worried that she made a mistake. So there's a little bit of context about Alyssa's question, but again, this is a very common response. And so what I think, Alyssa, could be going on here is a couple of different things. I think that this will sound weird, but because you were the one who ended this relationship in the beginning, and for good reasons. I mean, it really wasn't what you needed or wanted 100% at the time. And you didn't know how to solve the problems in that relationship. So you made a choice to say, is there something better out there for me? But you still maintained your attachment connection to your ex-boyfriend. He was occupying a very important space in your heart and in your life. He was a good friend. And it's only when he was like, actually, no, I can't do this with you anymore, did that attachment sever. And now you are in this withdrawal phase where you're feeling that in a new way. So I suspect that might be part of this. And recognizing this and being able to manage it is important. But additionally, Alyssa, you haven't really done the work of relationship clarity. It felt like you had clarity, but then it was kind of open-ended and you're thinking, was this my person? Was this the best person for me? Have I blown my chances? And I would invite you to go back through and think about the reasons why you ended this relationship, first of all, but also whether or not there is actually any hope for this particular connection. It sounds like there probably isn't. He's telling you that you need to leave him alone so that he can move on with his life. And then that will allow you to move into a real grieving phase where you're able to mourn this loss in a different way than maybe you have in the past, because it wasn't really over. Like cognitively it was over, but emotionally this has not been over. Additionally, I think that there's a lot of learning and growth for you to do around this, because you're describing a situation that had a lot of strengths. There were a lot of pieces of this relationship that worked really, really well for you. And it's important for you to reflect on those, to think about, here's what I want to do. Again, here's what I want to do more of. But also to have honest reflections about, here's where it felt like we weren't compatible and where it wasn't working for me. And so this is the kind of relationship I'd really like to have that includes both of these different components. Additionally, I will tell you that as a marriage counselor, I am often talking with couples who come into relationship coaching or couples therapy together because their sexual relationship doesn't feel like it's working for one of them or both of them. And that is growth work that we're invested in doing together. And so something that you might think about as you're considering what did I learn from this? What would I do differently next time? Is how to maybe handle that problem or other relationship issues differently. So could you have done some work in couples therapy? And I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, but I think what is missing for you right now is that you don't feel confident in creating the kind of relationship that you want in the future. And also in this last relationship, there was a little bit of black and white mindset. Either it has it all or it's not the right relationship for me. And as you grow and mature and learn how to think about relationships differently, that might be a really important component of having a different kind of relationship going forward. Because in my experience, everybody has to grow and change and adjust in order to not just, drop into the perfect relationship, but create a relationship that feels good for both people and do that together. Additionally, there might actually be, backing up, some work for you to do around emotional healing, specifically around regrets and fears that you've blown it. I suspect that there's also a lot of deep emotional growth work for you to do around, what is regret telling me about what I'd like to do differently in the future, but also coming into those fears and saying, what are my values around this? What is it that I am afraid of, and how can I actually transform that fear into motivation that will help me get really serious about creating a different future for myself based on what this experience has taught me, which takes you into that life design phase. Like, no, this isn't fear. This is motivation. And I really want to find my person that has all these things, and I have a plan that's going to help me create it. So I feel like that could be really positive and productive for you, Alyssa. Okay, so we have some additional questions here. And another one that I'd like to review with you guys is this, which is someone who wrote in talking to me about how much they just missed their ex. Like, there were so many things about that relationship that felt so good to them, and just day to day, like missing the companionship, missing talking to them, just really like feeling their absence. And that's where their pain and their thoughts about their ex are really coming from. And this is a little challenging for me to respond, because this is the kind of experience that could actually be indicative of somebody having work to do at a number of different parts of this process. So my first piece of advice would be to come to my website to Can't Stop Thinking About X and take that stages of a breakup assessment that I've told you about. So it's a bunch of questions, and it will help you identify like where you're good, but then where you're stuck. And the first score that you have is like, that's where you need to focus right now. You know, in the early stages of relationship loss, there's often a deep sense of, I miss you, I crave contact with you. If you were here right now, here's what we would be doing, this like longing. And it could be that you're having a withdrawal phase experience, but I don't know where you are in this process, but that is one speculation. I would also be really curious about just the way that you talk about your ex. Like, there were so many things that I love and miss about you. You know, are you still pining away for your ex? Are you still wishing you were together? Are you having reunion fantasies? Are you still watching what they're doing on social media and wishing that they're going to get in touch with you to say, I'm so sorry, I miss you too, let's get back together? In which case, relationship clarity is the name of the game. I don't know. Can you get back together to do some work? So like with the coaching process that we use here in Growing Self, or what I use in my programs to help people move this, we have this whole thing to help you figure out, can this relationship be saved? Takes you through all kinds of different points, almost like a flow chart of, you know, if this, then either yes or maybe, but if that, then no. And so to go through that, because I don't know, maybe they miss you too, and maybe it's worth thinking about whether or not you can restore that contact, work on your relationship, make some positive changes, and have a really exciting second chapter for this connection. I don't know. But if that is actually not possible for you, and you're still like fantasizing about getting back together, you need to create very real reality-based clarity for yourself about, no, actually this relationship is over. And even better, I want this relationship to be over because I don't want to have an emotional attachment to somebody who doesn't want to be with me. This is not good for me. This isn't healthy for me. I deserve better. Can be part of what this relationship clarity phase actually involves. But then once you're like, no, this is really over, you will move into a phase of closure and healing that sounds like you haven't done yet. Or maybe you're in it. Maybe this loneliness and longing that you're feeling is how your grief is being manifested. But my challenge to you as a therapist or a coach is, how are you working through that grief? And do you have strategies in place to help do the work of that grief? Because grieving is a very active process. And if you don't do that, or if you don't know how to do it, you can get stuck in grief, or also be in a place where you're like avoiding the work of grief, as we speculated could possibly be going on with grace. This is a really common thing. So those are some things that I would like to offer you. And then, of course, you know, once that is done, going back into the work of emotional healing. And I don't know, it could be that you're actually needing to work in this phase right now. It could be that you are 1000% clear that this relationship is over. And it could be that you have grieved this loss and you're like, no, we are done. And yet there are feelings coming up for you that you haven't fully worked through that are less about the relationship itself and more about your values or the things that you want in life, and that by paying attention to those feelings of loneliness in a different way, you're actually going to get a lot of information about yourself and what you want that will ultimately serve your life plan and your ability to create those things for yourself in an active way. So you asked me questions. I had questions for you. But I hope that this discussion was helpful in just creating some clarity around it. Okay, so let's see if we have other listener questions that have come up as we have been talking that we should attend to. Um, okay, here's one. I'll just read this to you. It is, Dr. Lisa, how best to stop recycling or going back over in your head the mistakes you made yourself or sabotaged based on your own past trauma or insecurities, other than learning from these things and doing things differently in the future. And so, okay, so it sounds like you're having a lot of thoughts about the mistakes you've made. There's a lot of blaming of yourself, a lot of regret, I would guess, some feelings of shame related to the things that you can see that you did in this relationship that created problems and that led to the outcome that you're experiencing. So, what this is telling me is that you are very much in or need to do the work of this emotional healing phase where you have big, dark emotions coming up inside of you, shame, regret, maybe even fear, like, how am I not going to do this again next time? I don't trust myself to not do this in my relationship next time, that are very important to dig into. And I will tell you, I found your question interesting in a way because you said, how can I get through this besides learning from these things and making a plan to do things differently in the future? So there are a couple of pieces of this. I think there's like where you are now, there's a middle, and then there is an end. And if you look at every, not just school of psychology and growth, but also religion, there is a component of redemption in all of them, because our need for redemption, to feel forgiven, like we have another chance, like there's a fresh start for us, is so fundamentally important to all of us, to the human experience. And part of the way that we achieve that sense of redemption is through doing the work of growth and healing, where you're able to come through that and out the other side and say, you know what? I'm a different person. I have learned and I have grown, and I am confident that I actually wouldn't do those things again. I know how to operate differently now because of the work that I've done. So it's an active kind of redemption. You've actually earned it. And doing that work has helped you not just ease the feelings of shame, but also given you confidence in yourself again, that you've earned the right to this confidence. You do feel like a different person. But until you do the work of learning and growing and healing, you won't be able to have that experience, which is the outcome that I would certainly hope for you. But so the middle piece of this is actually, I think, less about the relationship loss recovery process and more about using this as an opportunity, using this as motivation to say, you know what, I need to do some work on myself in this area and dig into the trauma with a very experienced, competent, licensed, qualified therapist or clinical psychologist who can help you go into that old trauma, understand how it is impacting your life today. And there are a number of very well-established evidence-based treatments for trauma that are highly effective. These could include things like EMDR or cognitive reprocessing therapy, but there's cognitive behavioral trauma reprocessing, but you're looking for an evidence-based form of trauma-focused treatment that you can do. And my guess is that until you do that work and really feel that the historical trauma has been healed and resolved, it will be difficult to feel like you have attained that level of change and growth that will help you feel confident in your ability to handle things differently in the future. And the other thing that I think you'll experience is through that trauma work, you will reclaim a deep sense of compassion for yourself and respect for yourself and everything that you've lived through and the fact that you are as okay as you are. So you have a lot of strengths. It sounds like you've been through a lot, and you deserve the kind of treatment that will help you really heal and then plug that healing work into the relationship loss recovery process. So that is where the action is for you. I'll just say, getting on my soapbox, one of the things that consistently bothers me is that there is, I think, a real lack of understanding in our culture about different kinds of therapy, different kinds of therapists, what each are for. And so it's very common for people to get into therapy that is either not actual therapy, like I'm thinking, text-based chat or AI-based therapy that is not going to move the needle for you, or getting involved with a therapist who does not possess the professional competencies and qualifications to be able to help you with your specific presenting issue. This happens all the time. Best case scenario, it's a waste of time and money and a lost opportunity when you do this, but worst case scenario can actually make things worse for you. So this is such an important mission for me. I put together a really detailed article for you on my website. It's all about evidence-based therapy, and I have another article on how to find a good therapist. If you come to growingself.com and just come to this free resources tab, you'll find links to those articles. Please read them. They're long, but they're packed with information so that you can make informed choices around how to get connected with a kind of therapist who will legitimately be able to help you. And I'll tell you, this kind of work is not what we do at Growing Self. You need a trauma-specific clinician. So just for what it's worth. But I have free resources on my site to help you get clarity about who it is that you want to work with. Okay, let's see. Do we have any other questions that we should attend to today before we wrap up? Or no? No? Okay. Well, again, I just want to put a link to this resource in front of you as you got from today's conversation. The name of the game when it comes to how do I stop thinking about my ex is first to figure out what stage of relationship recovery you are in, because loss recovery, it happens in stages and you can't skip over any of them. If you try to skip over them, if you don't do the work of the preceding phase, you'll get stuck and you won't be able to stop thinking about your ex because your mind and your emotions are saying, you haven't done this work yet. Pay attention to me. And until you do the work, they're going to be alive in your mind. And know that time does not heal this. It is doing the work that heals this. So just know that. So come to this link, take the quiz to get clarity into what stage you're in. Also, I want you to know this is not your fault. Just reiterate this. Nobody told you about these stages of healing. It was probably not communicated to you that there was a process. People say time heals all. People say you just need to grieve or block them on social media, not really understanding the mechanics. So I really hope that this talk helped you understand like the big picture and just impart on you that you need to take action. So the first step is to take this quiz to figure out where you are, and then also, just to let you know that help is here. I mean, if you would like to partner with a therapist or a coach who is well versed in the process that I'm explaining to you today, you're invited to come to growingself.com. You can book a free consultation with me or with one of the clinicians on our team. And we also have a recovery program that you can work through that will walk you through these steps so that you can move through these phases of change really effectively effectively and make progress, especially if you've been feeling stuck for a while. That's very much worth doing. So you can come and visit with me at growingself.com to learn more about our services, our programs, and also while you're there, take advantage of all the free resources that I have for you. Again, I'm the host of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. You can look for it wherever you listen, and I have tons of episodes on breakup recovery and the healing process that will hopefully be helpful for you, and the divorce experience as well. Okay, so that's it for today, and I hope that you do tune in next week. This live stream answering your questions and hanging out with you here is a regular part of my weekly routine now. I hope you make it part of your weekly routine every Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain. I live in Colorado, 12 p.m. Mountain, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm here hanging out with you. We're tackling a different growth, love, happiness, or success topic every week. So I'll be posting what we're going to be talking about in advance so you can think about if you want to join. I hope you do. And if you have ideas or questions or topics, or like, let's get together and have a live stream about this, I always want to hear from you. So please stay in touch with me through the socials or get in touch with me through my website, growingself.com. Okay, thanks for hanging out today, and I will talk to you soon.